Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Phyllis Italiano, and I am the hostess of the Democratic View. And on this show, we like to present some of the issues that we consider very important in our lovely, beautiful East Hampton. And with me today, I have a very special gentleman. His name is Jeremy Samuelson, and he is right now the executive director of CCOM, which is the Concerned Citizens of Montauk. And we want to start, Jeremy, by welcoming you and asking you to tell us all about you and how you got into this whole field. So, where are you born and raised?
I was born in Washington, D.C., and by the way, thank you for having me.
Oh, wow.
I was born in Washington, D.C.
I love it. I went to college there.
Oh, did you? Which
American
school?
University.
Oh, okay. I was actually born at Georgetown University. My father was a career soldier in the Army, and so we moved around quite a bit, and so where I was born is certainly not where I grew up. We moved around, as is typical for military families, quite a bit. Ended up finishing up high school in Southern Virginia, so we were kind of one coast back to the other coast, in between, back to the other coast and back again, and all of that. And when I finished high school, we were in Southern Virginia. So I came up to Long Island to go to Southampton College. Came and went for a while after that, actually as part of the college program I was in, but eventually settled out here, just knowing that I'd seen enough to know a good place when I saw it.
Yeah, you were smart.
Lucky, maybe. Yeah.
I would like to know, what do you call yourself? Do you call yourself an advocate? Do you call yourself an activist? What's the difference?
I call myself an environmentalist.
Okay, you call yourself an environmentalist. So how did that interest come about, especially from somebody who was traveling around and living in so many different areas? And, it's not like you were, from here or from some place where nature was a big part of your life. So what happened?
I think what happened was I was very lucky to be born to the parents that I was. And, one of the nice things that is flexible about growing up in a military family is when you get transferred from one duty station to another, if you do it right, you can save up your time, or in this case, my father was able to save up his time, and rather than, drive coast to coast in 3 days or 5 days or whatever, he would save all his vacation for as long as he was able, and then we would take that whole time and camp out at every national park along the way and see every waterfall we could, and, camp the whole way, and, try to eat hot dogs for dinner to save a little money and stay on the road a couple extra days. So I was very, very fortunate. By the time I was 20 years old, I had been able to go to all 50 states. And I think, it wasn't just, when you go to Alaska, you don't just go to Anchorage. You try to get out and you go see Mount McKinley and walk in the parks and try to catch a fish and do all that. And if you're lucky, which I very much consider myself that I was lucky, you get bit by a bug, and not just the mosquitoes that are in these parks, but the bug of the love of nature.
Having been to Alaska, I know about the mosquitoes there.
So I think it was a combination of being very lucky, the family I was born into, the opportunities that they had for us to be able to travel, and the decisions and choices that my parents made, which really inspired me as a kid.
Were you an only child?
Not at all. No, I have a sister who's 4 years older than I am.
Aha.
Yeah.
Okay. So all of that traveling got you to be interested in the environment, and Southampton College was the one that you chose to come to.
Yeah, I only applied to one college. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew where I wanted to go. The program has since been moved to Long Island University's Brooklyn campus, but at the time they had a program that was based in Southampton where you did your first year at the campus there, and then you spent probably the better portion of the next 3 years going to overseas centers focusing on the area or the topic that was most interesting to you. And for me, I was blessed coming into it knowing that ecology was really something that I wanted to look into more deeply. Although I didn't know the words yet. You know, it's one thing to be 4 years old and stand there and, you know, look up at a sequoia and know that this is something, and I'm fascinated by this. But you have to get into the formalized education aspect of it before you're able, I think, to focus in on whichever element of that holds the most interest for you.
You know, you're very young looking. Can I ask you how old you are?
I'm 37. I appreciate you saying that.
Well, you are very young. You're very young for me, anyway, for my age. So, and what drew you back to this area was the beauty of it?
Well, yes. I mean, when I was finishing up my last bit at college, I got a job working with a couple of local baymen, the Lester's family out of Springs. And we were working on pound traps, and that was actually the final piece of my work at Southampton College. I was doing a video documentary and a thesis on the sustainability of pound trap fishing in particular. So I was very lucky that they were willing to take me on as a crew member. And we fished lobster pots and did other things on the side because that's the nature of the fishery. But what ended up happening for me was that I very much fell in love with the community, and after I stopped fishing and got other jobs, you know, bouncing around as somebody fresh out of college tends to do, I had been here a couple years, and I guess I had sort of one last crack at trying to give East Hampton a chance. I'd been, you know, working 7 days a week and, you know, waiting tables at night and catering on the weekends and having a straight job during the week and trying to save every nickel I could, and I was ready to get on a plane and go. And I ended up getting a job working at the East Hampton Star, which was my first crack at journalism, and really enjoyed that work. But more important to the long-term arc of my life, when I was walking out of that interview, I caught a glimpse of the most gorgeous woman I had ever seen in my life. And now, a decade plus later, we're married and have 2 kids. So.
What a wonderful story.
Yeah.
And she was a native? She lived here?
She very much lives here. She's Carissa Katz. Still works at the Star to this day. She's not a native. She moved here, went to spring school. I think she started in the 3rd or 4th grade or something. So, you know, going by local rules, she's not a local.
Yeah, well, I know. But listen, she's lucky enough to have spent her youth here.
Yeah, absolutely.
God, it should only have been me. I envy anybody who really has spent those kind of years here.
Yeah. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Bronx. A little different. But I will say that when I went to college, American University, my sister, who had a few dollars, said to me, I'd like to rent a place in Fire Island. And you could go and rent it. I was living in Bayport at the time. Rent it, and you stay there, and I'll come out on weekends, because she was working at that time.
It's a pretty good deal.
And I did. And that was 35 years later. We were still in Fire Island. And at that point, she and her husband owned 2 houses. And I was madly in love with Long Island. I mean, she and I both said, oh my God, we love the flatness of Long Island. We love that you can look out and the sky hits the land, and you have those vistas that are so incredible here. Yeah. And it was an interesting story, was that a friend of mine that I was working with in Yonkers Public Schools, where I was an educator, teacher, invited me out to East Hampton. And I drove out to East Hampton, and I said, I could have been in Fire Island long ago. I mean, look at this. This is twice the distance. And I came down 27 and turned that corner and fell in love, like I have never fallen in love in my life. I just said, my God, this is the most beautiful place I ever saw. And, you know, a few years later, I had a house in the Springs. Nice. Which I love. Yeah. And I actually retired because I couldn't leave that house. Even though I loved my career, you know, nothing better than working with kids. So what was the first group that you worked for? It wasn't CCOM. You worked with another group, didn't you?
Just before my current position with Concerned Citizens of Montauk, I worked for 5 years with a different environmental nonprofit called Group for the East End.
That's where I think I knew your name from. Okay. Yes, always writing those checks to those guys too, you know.
Good.
Well, we're very interested. You know, I mean, I think the people who come here may have even more of a passion for trying to keep it the way it is, or the way it was when we first came, because we love it. And I think the people maybe who live here and were born and raised here kind of take it for granted. And we know that down that street is Nassau County, and we don't want it. We want to keep it beautiful the way it is. And that's what I know is going on in Montauk these days. And Montauk has really been, well, you made the Sunday Style section with that article. And you've had, Montauk has had a lot of problems in the last year or so.
Yeah, but I think the issues that we're facing now have been a long time coming. You know, I might see things a little differently than you do, because the feedback that I hear is that, you know, people who were either born and bred here and have been here for 3 generations, or came within the last 20 years like I did, or maybe they came 50 years ago, or they came out here as, you know, kids on weekends and then were lucky enough to be able to, you know, buy a house when they retired or something. Pretty much from across that wide spectrum of groups, I hear a lot of the same concerns. And it is, you know, true, I think, in East Hampton, we're all having a very different kind of summer. And it's certainly true in Montauk. There's nobody that I've run into that has said, you know what, this is great, it feels exactly like it should this summer. In fact, I've been getting exactly the opposite reaction, which is, it's too much. And, you know, when we're sitting there in traffic, and, you know, traffic is not something we're unaccustomed to here in the summer, even given the economic woes of the last several years. You know, we've been very fortunate as a resort economy to benefit from people still being able and wanting to come out here. But I think there's something different about this year, even compared to the years before the economic calamity that beset our economy. And I think it's that sort of the tone and the tenor has changed, the behavior and the attitude has changed, and the practice of how we make decisions has changed. So that I think you could argue under sort of, you know, in prior decades, we had a situation where if somebody wanted to come in and take over an old property and put a bunch of money into it and make it something that was worthwhile for the community, there was this fundamental assumption and understanding that they were going to participate in a planning process. And the planning process, from my point of view, you know, people always ask me, well, how is it that planning and zoning are related to the environment? And my answer is very simple. I say, directly. You know, when you design something and you're trying to figure out how many parking spaces go in front, how many rooms you're going to have, how many bathrooms you're going to have, where does that water that gets pumped through the bathrooms go in terms of the septic system. Those are all environmental issues, and we as a community you know, need to understand a very simple concept as we make these decisions, which is that every drop of water that we drink comes from the ground beneath our feet. And so when we discharge our septic systems, when we have rainfall like we had today, you were maybe in the studio, we had a rainfall of epic proportions this afternoon that unfolded within an hour and a half. There are parts of town where you simply can't drive right now because of the amount of water that's out there. So, you know, add that on top of all of us trying to find the back roads to get away from the traffic, and, you know, trying to figure out, you know, is the water in my house or the hotel where I'm going to stay safe to drink? These are things that tie directly back to the decisions we make at a community level about our planning and our zoning. Are we going to require some you know, folks who want to come in and put money into rehabilitating a structure to go through the planning process so that we ensure that the septic waste that gets generated as a result of that is actually being handled and cleaned properly before it enters our drinking water? Or, like we have in the South Lake, at the south end of Lake Montauk right now, do we have a beach that's been closed for 5 or 6 years because it is unsafe for swimming? Literally at the south end of Lake Montauk right now, Suffolk County doesn't even test the water anymore for what used to be a bathing beach where generations of people took their kids to swim because it's shallow, because it's sheltered, because there aren't waves. All of those same things contribute to it now being an area that doesn't have a tidal turnover at a rate that's fast enough to get the waste out that we put into it. we're living with a legacy of poor design. And some of it was ignorance, some of it was old building standards. You know, we have inherited this reality where systems that were either poorly designed or not properly installed, or even if they were 40 years ago, 30 years ago, even 20 years ago, are now putting waste into our groundwater that leaches directly into the south end of Lake Montauk. That means you can't eat the clams. That means you can't take your kids swimming there. It's essentially a dead zone. And that's a tragedy. You know, you talked about making the decision to drive twice as far as you did in, you know, years past to come out here. How much more of this can we do? How many more years can we go where we're having people get killed on the roads on a weekly basis, where we have water bodies that are closed because they're unsafe for swimming, not because animals, you know, or dog waste even, or people have been irresponsible pet owners, but human waste is showing up in our water bodies before people stop making the decision to come all the way out to the end of Long Island. You know, Fire Island starts looking pretty good at some point when you know that, you know, it rained this week, so I can't go swimming in East Hampton.
Well, you know, I like to always quote Tim Bishop, who I've interviewed on this show several times. I mean, he was the one who first said to me, the environment is the economy.
Absolutely.
The economy is the environment.
Absolutely.
And if we don't have pristine waters and water to drink and beautiful beaches, no one's going to want to come out here.
Yeah.
And that is something that the powers that be are not quite dealing with.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a discussion this week about the scab waste, which is, as far as I'm concerned, even though there are so many hot issues here. I was last night I went to the discussion about the airport and the noise that we get, which I'm in the Springs, way out by Clearwater Beach, and I sometimes I'm jumping out of my bed from the sound of the airplanes. But as all of those issues are so important, scab waste is the most important. Because if we don't have water to drink, we don't have beaches to swim in that are clean, and I swim every single morning at Gardner's Bay. I swam this morning.
Nice.
And I usually swim at night again. And if I don't have that, what am I going to be here for?
Right. So somebody once offered me the line that everybody who works out here and is able to make a living out here is no more than 2 degrees of separation away from the real estate industry. I thought about that for a minute, and my response was, maybe, but that means that anyone who lives out here and is able to make a living here and support a family is no more than 3 degrees of separation away from the environment. You know, the reason the real estate industry, you know, is a driver of our economy is because this is a beautiful place. And I'm not one for cliches, but in an effort to sort of simplify my concerns, I've been saying to people in the last 2 weeks that there are 2 old cliches that I think really hold true for us right now. And the first one is, you know, the old saw about 10 pounds of flour in a 5-pound bag. It just doesn't work. And the second one is killing the goose that laid the golden egg. So we are simultaneously trying to put too much into too small a vessel, and at the same time we're risking the very underpinnings of our economy. So I think we have to, you know, get over this idea that anyone who, you know, wants somebody to participate in the planning process is, you know, somehow a naysayer or a NIMBY or just a buzzkill. No. Those, I think, by and large, ideas, those notions are motivated simply by the idea that you can only put so much into a vessel before it can't contain anymore. And I would challenge anyone, you know, who has tried to drive around out here in the last couple weeks to say, no, this feels like we're scaled properly with our infrastructure. And so is the answer then, well, we just need wider roads and we need bigger storm basins and, you know, we need bigger homes and we need more grocery stores? No, because that gets to the second half of the equation. I can get that in Nassau County. Why on God's green earth would I come all the way out here, pay the inflated prices, and deal with all of that extra traffic to have the same experience that I could have, you know, anywhere west of here?
You know what? Obviously, you and I think quite alike because that's exactly what I feel. I mean, I like to quote Dr. Gobler, who did the wonderful forum that they had on the toxic algae bloom.
Yeah.
And I mean, he said that, and he quoted Lee Koppelman, who was the original planner
Yeah.
for Nassau County, for Suffolk County, and he said, if I had to do it all over again, I would have bought up every piece of open land. And gosh, it's so true. I mean, it has, and this is also coming out of Stony Brook, that Long Island and Suffolk County have reached its maximum. And we can't really take more. It's just too fragile an environment. You know, I often wonder if some of the people who are in control of what goes on in this town have ever taken that basic Ecology 101 class that told you how Long Island got to be and how fragile it really is as a ground. You know, it's an incredible, wonderful place, but it can't support everybody.
Yeah, there's this this rather notion in ecology called carrying capacity, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Ecologists and biologists will often use it to say, oh, okay, if you've got a pride of 20 lions, this is how big an area and how large a range and how much prey they need, and all of that. The same concept applies to us as a population. And look, I don't think we're in a position to say nobody can build anything, or that nobody else can come to the east end of Long Island. That's not the message. And there are a lot of people who want to say that that's the message and then have a fight about that. That's not my message, and I don't think it's the message of people who work as professionals in planning and zoning and environmental protection. The message is that there has to be deliberate thought on the front end of decisions, that we really run through and say, what are the known impacts? What are the potential unknown impacts? How do we mitigate against those? How do we minimize them? How do we ensure that we're not actually diminishing our underlying value, whether that's financial, economic, or ecological? There are real values associated with living in a place where you have the opportunity to be exposed to nature. The best part of my job is when I get to work with kids in the schools and get them up out of their seats and take them outside and take them to someplace like the walking dunes. Talk to them about the rare and protected species that are there. Talk to them about the geologic formation of that amazing place. Hither Hills, Camp Hero, Big Reed Pond, all of these places where you get a kid out there and their eyes just grow in their head and they have an experience. There's a real rush that happens for me when I get to be the one to give them that experience.
I know that feeling because I've done that
as
with
an
children.
educator.
Yes,
Exactly.
I've had that with children. And elementary is my specialty.
There you go.
But I wanted to also mention, you talking about some of those wonderful places in Montauk, and I swim all year at Gurney's. And when I first bought my house, my then husband said, well, where's the golf course? So somebody said, well, you go down 27 and you'll get to Montauk, and there's this beautiful golf course there. And I went to Montauk and I said, oh, I should have bought here. This is the most beautiful thing. My goodness gracious, I love it. Well, I ain't saying that now. Now I'm saying to myself, well, maybe it's better I didn't buy in Montauk, because Montauk has really been struggling to maintain what they had a few years ago. I mean, some of these stories that we read about and hear about, and with the nightclubs and the music and the crowds and what's going on there is really, it's like holy mackerel. And I don't think that they were given the consequences that they should have been given. I mean, $100,000 is nothing when you've made, $100,000 in a weekend. So what's $100,000? It should have gone to Supreme Court in Riverhead and should have been fought there and see what they would have. Or they should have been closed down. So there are a lot of things that those of us who are active, have to be diligent about and try to help, places like Montauk. And
Yeah.
is that the focus of your group?
Yeah, my hope is that there's a silver lining to the experience that we're all living through now, and Montauk is a great example. Sadly, it's not the only one. That it doesn't matter what color hat you're wearing. If if red, blue, whatever, that doesn't matter. When you start taking a look around and you're saying, our community is on the verge of not working as a community anymore, I think that should be alarming to everyone. And I think we've sort of chewed through over the last couple of years, all of the standard tropes about, well, I say this about the other guy, and the other guy says this about me, and that's just ideology. And I think when you get through all that and you're done with all the fistfights and all the ridiculous yelling back and forth at town hall and finger pointing that goes on, I think what you're left with at the end of the day is, you have to acknowledge the idea that what we're doing isn't working. We run the risk of killing the goose that laid the golden egg. We have to take responsibility as individuals, as business owners, as people who live here year-round, whether you are a fifth-generation family or whether you're somebody who came in the last year. I think the reason we're all here, the reason we've committed to this community, is because there is something beautiful here. And if we're going to continue to be able to say that 5 years from now and 10 years from now, we've got to get off of these stumps where people are just lobbing the same old grenades back and forth, and actually get down to the meat of the issues. If somebody's going to come into a property like the beach house in Montauk and put $2 million into it and significantly change the face of that business, there's a process that you have to go through. Planning, zoning, site plan review.
Yes.
I'm not telling tales out of school. Chris Jones walked down the street. He walked into the office. It wasn't the first time he and I met. He said, "Can we talk?" This was after the whole thing was said and done. And he said, people don't know this great thing about us, and we did this rainwater recharge project. And I said, "Chris, that's all great. None of that would have been obviated by the zoning process. But you have a responsibility to demonstrate to the community that the septic you're putting in the ground is exactly what your system can handle."
I was going to say goodbye because we were talking to the end.
Right. We talked over. That's all right.
God, we certainly did, yes. But, of course, that's